In this video, we're going to talk just a little bit about our classroom walkthrough tool. We're going to review that and do a little bit of analysis and then plan for next year. Just kind of to go back and rephrase where we started, our classroom walkthrough was based on Succeed, our district vision for last year. It was initially, the development began with a curriculum and instruction team, and then we brought that to a couple of different principals meetings and sent out updates and got input from CO instructional staff and principals. And the purposes of the walkthrough was to get a snapshot of instruction, to start some pedagogical conversations, and to delve into a little bit and scratch the surface on the idea of observer agreement. So what we want to do during the next few minutes is to review the content of the tool and to also review some of our data. So some takeaways from last year were we're going to review the CWTs per site, we're going to look at the data, and we're going to look at some of the problems with the data. So before we do that, I actually want to go look at the responses that we have here. So in summary, as you guys can see, we had 423 responses, but that is misleading. We toyed with the idea of the CWT, and we worked on it for how we were going to do it. We played with that, and we tweaked it, we changed it. And one of the things that we changed was we said that if you did a walkthrough with a partner or someone from the CO or someone from the school, that only one person needs to put that in the tool. And what we found was, specifically at North Newton, and I'm not sure if it happened at other sites or not, but that when the walkthrough was done, somebody was submitting the walkthrough to the teacher and the other partner was submitting the walkthrough to the principal. And that skews our data, because then you have the same walkthrough data sent both to the teacher and to the principal. And so the data specifically, I know with one of our schools, is going to be a little off. But when we look at this, we're going to talk in a moment about the commitment that we made to do 4 walkthroughs per week, and obviously that did not happen. So everything gets busy, and maybe there's some choices that we can make or some changes that we can make to that expectation so that we can feel like we can fulfill that commitment. So we'll talk about what we think may went wrong there. But if you can look at the summary, you'll see that some of our schools, at Newton Conover High School, of course, there are more assistant principals, so we would expect more walkthroughs. There are more teachers as well. But you can see kind of the distribution. But do note that some of our schools did, every walkthrough was captured twice. So keep that in mind. So the data there is not specific. One of the things that I think really is kind of a concern, though, and I just want you to mention it. And when I mean concern, it's not horrible. I just think it's a little bit bothersome. Is that not every teacher got a walkthrough during the whole year? So in some instances, there are several teachers in one school that didn't get one walkthrough, or they never got feedback from a walkthrough form. So that's something that I think is kind of a red flag that we need to consider for next year. And then we have some teachers, of course, that got like 5 or 6 walkthroughs and some that got 0. So we can kind of just take a look. I'm going to quickly go through this very slowly so that you can kind of stop at your school and see kind of the walkthroughs there. For some reason, the CWT will not let me share this data in a way that I can just open it up so that you can see it, or it may, and I can't figure that out. I will, though, however, pull this up for you guys so that you can see it at the retreat if you would like to. See, and here's an example of where things were sent to the principal while they were simultaneously sent to a teacher. And I do understand that maybe one of the reasons why we have some folks did not get let's look here, for example, maybe this teacher did not get one because it was sent instead to the principal. So we just probably need some clarification on that. I know that just looking at the data, there's probably a lot of questions I don't know the answers to that might make me say, oh, okay, well, that makes perfect sense. So just looking, though, at the distribution. So some of the schools did a better job of distributing those walkthroughs among folks than others. And that's okay. We're going to talk about how we can make that process better next year. So in looking at a review of the 2013-14 data, looking at alignment between instruction and the essential questions or clear learning targets, Almost 70% said yes, but we still had 26% that were not sure or there was nothing posted there, and 6% was said absolutely no, there was not alignment. So there's 32% there that could be an area for improvement, and I think that we'll talk about how we'll do that, and I have an idea how we might do that. And we look at the P21 framework and the 4Cs last year, and we started discussions on those, and we'll continue that again this year. And you can kind of look at how those 4Cs played out in class. Not surprisingly, creativity is low because creativity is one of the most challenging one of the 4Cs to address in class and to give students opportunities to be creative. I was actually kind of surprised that there was 26% of critical thinking. That's a little higher than I had anticipated because that was generally a little bit more challenging too. So it's very good. 12% of our classes, 82 walkthroughs, we saw no evidence of any of the 4Cs. In this graph, we can look at the types of instructional technology being implemented. Of course, as would be expected, we have a high number of projectors, a high number of laptops. Not necessarily that it's a bad thing that we have 19% of our classes have none, but because sometimes no technology is the best pedagogy for students. We know that. So, but interestingly enough, you can kind of look and see that during walkthroughs, what was used and what was not used. When we look at who is using technology, not surprising that we have 38% of classrooms where technology was being used, the teachers were using it. In 32% students, no technology in 27, and other, I don't know if that's a media specialist or whether it's a visitor to the classroom, but other folks were using technology. And then this next question looked at the TPAC model and whether technology was aligned to the standards and aligned to our central questions or clear learning targets. And we did say that in 46% of classrooms that it was. And we also have to take into account that in 32% of those classrooms there wasn't technology used, so we couldn't answer the question. So that's pretty good. Still got some areas for improvement with those folks that didn't have questions or where the administrator or the CO staff member could not tell. Is technology enhancing the curriculum? I think this is one that gave me a little bit of area for concern because in 31% of classrooms we said technology was not enhancing the curriculum, and in 6% of those classrooms it wasn't clear whether it was. Of course, we completely disregard the no technology used there, but that one is one that gave me some concern. Going back to revised Bloom's, I thought this was interesting because in the creativity on the 4Cs, we saw a vastly higher number than 74% here in the creating. But here, when we actually look at Bloom's revised taxonomy with all of the levels, we only had 7% in creating, and I know that's misleading with six different things to choose from rather than just the 4, but I thought that was a little bit, that data does not equate to the data from the previous question on the 4Cs. But in looking at this, we did have a lot of the lower level, and that's not surprising, but what we would really like to see happening in our classrooms, and I'm sure you as administrators and coaches would like to see in your classrooms, is you'd love to see that level move up here to the analyzing, applying, evaluating, and creating. This is important. But really, when we do classroom walkthroughs, we should be seeing more of the whole gamut. And this is a red flag for me too, that we're so low on these upper levels of Bloom's. So Schlechty's levels of engagement, and if you remember, we went through a lot trying to reevaluate this and change the wording, and finally we got some closure on this by doing the Schlechty's levels of engaged, compliant, and off task. And I think that ended up working okay for us. I'd like your insights on if you like this or you'd like to see it changed, and we'll address that in a little bit. Evidence of differentiation, again here, 151, we did say yes, there was, but when we look at our pie graph, the no and the unsure really gives us an idea that we've got a lot of work to do in the area of differentiation. When most of us were in the classroom, differentiation was something you did to go above and beyond, and now we know that differentiation should be occurring every day in every classroom. So this is also an area where I think we have some serious work to do. So next steps, we're going to be making some changes to the classroom walkthrough tool to reflect where we've come from, to reflect this data, and to reflect some of your input that you want to provide as well. One of the things we'll be doing is we'll be switching out the TPAC model and talking a little bit about the SAMR model. And in this series of flip videos, Cindy's going to do one for you on the SAMR model and to help teachers understand how they're using technology with students. And I think it really clearly defines where we are and how we can move forward with technology individually and differentiated for teachers. We're going to do a review and analysis of clear learning targets, or ICANN statements, as we call them in elementary school, and essential questions. I think we could do some improvement on how we use these and what their purpose is, and ensuring that those questions and targets are aligned with the standards and not with our resources. We'll do more with that as the year goes on. We're going to talk about an emphasis on lesson design. And I know specifically in the middle school and in science in the elementary schools, we're going to be looking at the Understanding by Design lesson planning tool, and I'll be sharing a video with you on that as well. And of course, any suggestions that you have, we'd like to see reflected in the classroom walkthrough tool for next year. So as I stated earlier, we did make a commitment last year that we were going to do 4 collaborative walkthroughs per week. A CO member and a site-based administrator would do those walkthroughs together. And we got a lot of feedback on things that happened, and I know that it happened to me as well as many of you, that often site-based administrators get pulled away for emergencies or parents or unexpected meetings that you just can't help. So sometimes these collaborative walkthroughs were thwarted. So we'd like to talk about and think about how do you see us not letting that get in the way of our commitment of how many walkthroughs we decide to do next year. There were several challenges, and I'm sure that's not the only challenge to getting the walkthroughs done. Everybody's schedules are very busy. So I'd like you to think about what were some of the challenges for you in meeting that commitment. And what were some of the successes with the classroom walkthroughs? And some of you have shared some of those specific successes with us. So where this video is housed on the wiki, if you look to the right, there's a link to a Google form. And I'd like you to click that link and give us some brief feedback. It is not a very long form at all, but we will definitely pull that up at the retreat and use that to move forward with this process and development of the tool for this year. One of the things that I kind of suggested that you do last year, and I know Julia shared out at a principals meeting that it was very effective in her school, was instructional rounds. And I'd really like for us to think about making this a common practice this year. And so during the retreat last month, we talked about ways that teachers could be leaders in your school and tapping into some of the leadership potential. So in instructional rounds, this is a great opportunity to kind of let some of those teachers demonstrate their leadership in 2 different ways, both as leading rounds and or as being teachers who are selected to be observed during rounds. So the primary purpose is not like our classroom walkthrough to give the teacher feedback or to collect data, but the primary purpose is to allow teachers in your building to compare their instructional strategies with teachers who are observed based on what they see, and then having a very detailed and rich facilitated discussion after the observation. So in terms of getting started, the key idea is that each teacher should participate in a round once each semester, and that rounds should be facilitated by a lead teacher or instructional coach or someone who's respected by the faculty. Administrators may lead the rounds, but it's just got to be clear that it's not evaluative and that this is not to go in and coach a teacher that you're observing. So depending on the climate of your school, depending on the rapport you have, I know all of you have great rapport with your teachers, but depending on what you want out of the round, you can decide whether that needs to be facilitated by a coach, a lead teacher or yourself. This is a great way to grow teachers who you think might be wanting to move into leadership roles who are also instructionally sound by allowing them to facilitate these rounds. So in a round, teachers should be asked beforehand, can we observe you? And those teachers should have the qualities of a master teacher. Those folks that you observe should be using a variety of instructional strategies. They should be using a variety of methods to meet the needs of students, both academically, to differentiate for them in terms of kinesthetic movement, learning styles, all of those great things. So your round should be small, no more than 5 teachers, 3 to 5, and you want at least 3 because you want to facilitate some discussion afterwards, and that doesn't count the lead teacher. So the group should, of course, enter quickly, move to the back of the classroom, not interrupt disruption, and oftentimes not interrupt instruction. Oftentimes during classroom walkthroughs, we actually ask the kids, what are you learning today? Tell me about what you're doing. We don't want any of that in a round. A round is much more, we're just taking it in. We're not asking any questions. And the round should last a little bit longer. They're going to take 10 to 15 minutes. And so what we may do is ask teachers to look for particular instructional strategies that they're interested in, or depending on what your school's focusing on or what your PLCs are doing, or what PD that you have provided or we're providing from the district, you may have a focus in your rounds. As I said, 10 to 15 minutes, so they're quite a bit longer than a walkthrough, and then a debrief immediately afterwards. So when you go into the debrief, your leader should be reminding the teachers of the purpose. It's got to continue to be put in the forefront that this is not evaluative. And there's 3 rules that in some way should be shared. That observers should not be sharing what they have seen in a lesson with anyone outside this group. That they should not share any comments made during the debrief with people outside of the debrief. And they shouldn't go offer suggestions or feedback to the teacher unless the teacher specifically asks for suggestions or feedback to that person who was observing. So, of course, the lead teacher would ensure all voices are heard. Plus delta is a great way to begin the debrief. And with the pluses, it should go a step further by saying, if this is a plus, then what do you think the positive outcome may be from that experience? If it's a delta, discussing questions or concerns about the observation and what they think should have been done differently or could have been done differently, or next steps. So also, debrief should end with teachers in sharing how they're going to change their classroom practice or re-examine things they used to do but didn't do anymore based on what they saw during the observation. The goal is just to build capacity of teachers. A ticket out the door, a personal commitment, some sort of reflective piece is very appropriate at this point. So that's just a little bit of information on looking at last year's classroom walkthrough, kind of where we were, some of the challenges, some of the things we observed from the district level or from conversations with you, looking at how to take that to the next step. Now that we've been pushing into classrooms, now how do we use instructional rounds and kind of grow that as another way to kind of constantly be observing classroom instruction and supporting teachers as they grow. So for next steps, I'd like for you to, at the right, click on the Google form, capture your thoughts for improvement for our CWT process. The article that I took all of the information about instructional rounds from is also linked to the right if you'd like to review that. Of course, all this was written by Marzano. And kind of think about, how do you see instructional rounds working in your school? Do you already have somebody in mind who could lead those rounds? Do you have multiple folks that might lead those rounds during time? What would a schedule look like for those rounds? So that's going to be our next steps for that. And we'll discuss this more at length at the retreat, but I just want to show you in the wiki space, here you've got your the form I want you to click through on, and that will take you here to give some feedback. You've also got this presentation if you'd like to kind of view it more slowly and go back and look at the data. This is also the article that I just shared with you. So we look